Um, all right, so it's my incredible pleasure to welcome our panelists, Clelia McElroy and Jess Goldschmidt. Clelia and Jess wrote two of our nonfiction pieces in issue 3, Hysteria. And today we're going to be talking about hysteria in horror. Jess and Clelia's pieces deal a lot with the kind of intersection of personal experience and horror, and both actually touch a lot on Kier Janice's book. Um, and I am House of Psychotic Women, and I think it's a really exciting opportunity for us to talk about the ways in which that book kind of shaped Rachel representing
Oh
the
my
way.
God, wait, I have mine too, but it has the other cover.
I was gonna
Okay,
say I
let's
can't wait
see
for
that
mine.
cover.
I want to get mine. Hold
I
on.
don't know the other cover.
It's the Let's Scare Jessica to Death cover.
Uh,
Oh, okay,
nice.
very nice.
Go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, I actually haven't seen that cover, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I want to talk today about like the intersections of personal experience, hysteria, and horror, and the way that horror films function as a kind of lens through which a lot of us view personal experience and trauma. So, I would love to kind of begin by talking about the way Clelia and Jess, we can kind of take turns. The way that horror perhaps acts as a mirror or a lens through which you view your own life, and the way that it's either uh, a framework that offers catharsis or um, maybe is re-traumatizing, or how horror kind of operates um, as a lens for your own life. So I don't know, Jess, can I put you in the hot seat? Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I love that we're in the Kira Janice hive. I feel that she's a real anchor point for that practice and is like so meticulous and it is so like deeply committed and it's like a living archive of that practice in this way that I think is really amazing. Um, and I think when I came to that book, I was in grad school. My professor gave it to me in grad school, and the initial response that I had was like the class was a little bit negative, and I was just like, totally, what are you talking about? Best book I've ever read, because it's like this really incredible liberatory feeling initially for me to see something, to see myself mirrored in any way on screen, but like specifically around horrific physical, like body horror in particular, is like my personal thing that like initially it's just like a total thrill. And it's interesting. It's like I really trust that initial total thrill. And also I think in this piece I was trying to kind of like dig at it a little bit and be like, okay, yeah, but then like over time, like the re-traumatization thing that you talked about, like yes, and that there's a possibility for that. There's but mostly I was really interested in and have been interested in like, okay, how can I use this mirroring as a potential way to heal? And I do think that that's possible, but I also think sometimes it becomes a like reaffirmation of suffering, and that is like less useful for me. So it's just been like a real journey that I think I'm continuing to be on. And I also um, don't want to derail the conversation about this, but I just saw the substance. So if anybody wants to talk about the substance on this panel,
Don't worry, I've
it
already
was
got it in my notes. We're
great, great,
doing
great.
it.
It did really feel like, wow, okay, this is right at the intersection of questions I have around like what level of intensity in that mirroring is like deeply cathartic and real and gives you back like, yes, that's how much it hurts. Yes, that's how much it's horrifying. Yes, that's how I feel all the time. And what level of it is like, um, what's the word? yeah, it's not re-traumatizing exactly, but it begins to like, I use that phrase like there's like the French word mise en abîme, which is like a mirror to a mirror, and you're just going back and forth forever, and there's kind of no way out. And so, at what point does it tip over into that? And that's, I think, a really interesting question for me that I don't have an answer to. So that's why it's an interesting question.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about the substance for sure.
Oh my
Um,
God.
Clelia, can I turn it over to you?
Yeah, I actually haven't seen The Substance yet, so I feel like,
We won't spoil it.
Won't spoil
yeah,
anything.
yeah, no, it's fine. I just, yeah, I'm really looking forward to watching it. Just haven't had a chance to yet. But talking about Kayla Janice, actually, I stumbled actually across her book when I started Monstrous Flesh, and the first course that I was doing was about women's bodies in horror, and obviously doing my research. And that's kind of one of the first book I came across, and I just couldn't believe that I hadn't come across it before. And actually, in turn of events, that is quite fantastic. But a couple of years ago, when Kelly Janice did her book tour for the 10th anniversary of the book and the release, and that's why there's the new cover. She came to Nottingham, and I did Q&A. So I had a chance to speak to her, and that that experience of mixing a personal journey with her relationship to horror and those films. And it was kind of really reassuring actually to hear her talk about how, like, she said, like, she couldn't go back and read that part of the book because it's just too the re-traumatizing. It's just so it's constantly happening basically. So she was like, if I go back and revisit that, it's just, yeah, it's kind of the nightmare never ends sort of thing. So whilst it's cathartic to write it, it's something else to go back and visit it, and revisit it. So when I saw the call for submissions for for Hysteria, I was really excited because I'd been thinking about writing a piece on my personal experience for a really long time, and so it was a really great experience to be able to do that. But I really must commend your editor Anna. She was just so, I think the piece would never be where it is now. I think editing is such a humbling experience. So to have someone to have an external external eyes, on it, and be able to see the thoughts in them, but also push you as well to explore those things. I think I was kind of going at it, but not wanting to. Yeah, just not wanting to go there really, which was it was kind of it's just a difficult thing to do, and I haven't done a ton of personal essays, so that was kind of a really really great experience in that respect. But I also my what I really wanted to do with this piece as well is to write something that wasn't, it gave just enough of the personal, but was also relatable, because that's that idea of hysteria, or the way that I wanted to explore it in this piece at least, was about how we all go, as women, non-binary people, anybody on the margins basically go through all these incredible traumatizing things, but we tend to, yeah, to just push them down and just say, well, everybody goes through really difficult things, so therefore, what's interesting about me, sharing those things, when in fact, personally, I never tire of hearing people's stories. So it's been great to write something, and having people reading it, and giving feedback of, like, they find it extremely relatable. So that's, and that was the idea, is to write something that people can see themselves in as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that I'm so curious about like the experience of this writing, because I know for Janice, the process was one of like it seemed therapeutic and also like deeply painful. And you can feel that in the writing, which is, I think, why it has such lasting power. And I wonder, Jess, what was your experience of writing your piece?
Um, well, first of all, I wanted to plus one to what Clelia was saying about like trying to find that place where you are in the personal, but you're not. It's not like the, the kids say, like, trauma dumping, or you're trauma, or you're just sort of like, yeah, and it's not that exactly, but it's something something close. So when I wrote this piece initially, I wrote it this is an edited version of an older thing that I'd written in grad school in response to the book directly. So like we read the book in a course that I took, which I loved, which is it was called bibliomemoir. It's a made up word, but it was basically like writing of memoir through writing about another text. So so writing your life through somebody else's text in some way. And the professor sort of extended it to also be about film. And so this book was a big one because she's doing both. She's writing through film. And it was the pandemic. The class had like started in person and then gone online. And I was incredibly lonely and scared. And so I just sort of like watched Let's Scare Jessica to Death like on my little laptop like 3 times, and really felt so powerfully that feeling that Janice talks about like how liberating it feels to have that seeing yourself, and also felt like the real kind of terror in that and like the edginess of sanity that can come from that. So the original version of this was really kind of like a class response that I made like more personal than I needed to because I like kind of had to at the time. And then for this, I went back to that, having recently read this Eve Kosofsky-Sedgwick book, which I also have somewhere. I don't have to get it. Anyway, it's a collection of her essays about pedagogy. And so basically I had another framework for trying to think through what I was doing in that essay. So it actually was very, I think I made it theoretical so that it would not be stressful, if that makes sense. So like it's stressful in a different way, but so it wouldn't be emotionally stressful. I was like, great, I'm gonna try to play with a theoretical framework that I probably don't know that much about, but like let's try, in order to not necessarily have to access the like emotional intensity of writing that piece, which was like a lot about me having cancer and was a lot about me like coming back to grad school after having cancer in the middle of grad school. And I just really needed something else. So working on it this time felt really challenging, but intellectually and in a way of like trying to kind of do that work. And that was great. I had a great time, actually. It was really fun to do. And it was really fun to rewatch the movie, having not seen it like since I'd watched it like 5 times on my laptop in the pandemic. So I really wound up having a great time, which the initial process of it was a pretty terrible time.
That's so interesting that you had that kind of space from it and also so many layers of like bizarreness when you wrote it originally, like with COVID and with cancer, and then to come back from a place of distance and like analyze it differently. I imagine the piece like really transformed.
Yeah, it really did. And some of what you were saying about like coming, maybe not being able to reread it or like or having like I was kind of worried about that with this piece. I was like, oh God, what's it gonna be like? Am I just gonna suddenly be in my weird apartment in LA? I went to grad school in LA. So like, am I gonna be in my weird LA apartment again? And I wasn't. Like I think I set up enough things so that I wasn't entirely.
Yeah, and that's something I wonder too, like for both of you, was there a moment at which horror went from being just like a form of entertainment and something fun to like maybe, watch under the covers with your friends in high school or something, and then a kind of shift or an aha moment where it became more like you saw the potential of the genre from this metaphorical and analytical point of view. Because I know for me, that was definitely the case. Like I loved watching horror movies kind of in the way I love going on roller coasters. Like the thrill of it was really what drew me to it initially as a teenager. And then it was actually when I saw Raw by Julia Ducournau that like this like just profound clicking into place happened for me where I was like, oh, this is what I want to spend the rest of my life doing. Did you guys have a kind of similar experience or something really different? Clelia, do you want to start?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I just wanted to say also that I just I read your piece a couple of days ago, and it really stayed with me. I just thought, in terms of what you were saying, and that balance, I just thought was just so absolutely perfect. And I can imagine how it would be, it can be difficult to revisit it, and at the same time, it's just, yeah, I mean, I just thought it was incredibly well researched and so beautifully written. So yeah, sorry, just wanted to mention
No,
that.
please.
Plus one to your, yeah, I loved reading your piece. I really did. I had a great time.
But yeah, in terms that it's exactly what you just described there. In terms of horror, I think I definitely experienced horror as a a lot of it was very entertaining. I mean, it was traumatizing as a first thing because I was introduced to horror by my big brother who loved to absolutely terrorize me. So I think I watched Child's Play when I was 5, and that I always mention that when talk ask people to talk about their first experience watching horror. And for me, I'm kind of like, it really comes from a place of like getting absolutely terrorized watching dolls, and getting all the dolls out of my room. But I think what really clicked with me is like watching Possession for the first time, and I think this is when it tipped from watching horror for entertainment to all of a sudden seeing, it's hard to say seeing myself in it, but kind of mirroring an experience that all of a sudden you realize that this says so much more than than what's on screen. You can project so much more than what is on screen. I mean, especially with Possession, I think it's kind of like you
Well,
have to.
your narration of Possession, of watching Possession, is so good too, because it is like the logic of it and the way you talk about that, it just like made sense. It's like that movie is like so incredible because from jump it has no, and I guess it's like a lot of his other movies, which I haven't seen that many of in that sense, but like from jump it has like no basic film logic. Like
Yeah,
everyone is just screaming and and like vomiting. They're like the extremity is just so consistent that like it actually just becomes its own thing, and it makes complete sense in this way. Like I remember feeling so excited by in a hysterical way because I
mhm.
was like when I saw Possession for the first time, I was with a friend who now is also like in psychoanalysis and also identifies as a hysteric. And we're both like, this is a whole thing that we share. And we cite this as like an inciting incident for us because we went to this like sold out theater and watched Possession and just screamed for the whole time. Like the whole audience was just screaming. And it was like laughter, but it was also like fear. And then it would be humor. And then we'd be like, really emotionally, but like kind of throughout the entire movie in this way that I was like, oh yeah, everybody here really needed this, me
Yeah,
included.
that's it.
it's, it's really, I think it's an amazing movie. I haven't really had another
No,
cinema.
it's so exhausting as well. I think it's one of those films when you finish watching it, you just feel completely exhausted because you went on that journey with those characters. And as you said, I mean, yeah, the idea of watching it with an audience that is also going through their own cathartic journey, watching it is just it's amazing. That's exactly what it's here for.
Yeah. There's a theater in New York that that sort of I guess got the rights to it in some way. It's Metrograph. If you guys know Metrograph, they like have an online presence and they have an edition of it. So they'll show it, they screen it like in a late showing pretty regularly now. And there's basically like, it seems like there's a whole Possession community. Like there's people who go every time. Nobody like Rocky Horrors it as far as I know, but like kind of like not, you know what I mean? Like it's like this real, they have this incredible poster that I literally have up in my bedroom where I was like, maybe I can zoom from my bedroom, but it's too close there. But it's just it feels like it unlocks something for people in this way that I loved your narration of that for you personally because it is so specific but also like has some universal something. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think also like Clelia, something you do so beautifully in your pieces, you tie these films to different moments in your life where they like specifically resonated and where like there was a bleeding over of these traumatic experiences in the movies that kind of gave you a framework from which to understand them. And I know like I watched Inside while pregnant, which I don't recommend. but it was also like, the internal turmoil is then externalized, and you can kind of like enjoy it in a sick way because it's not happening inside of you. And I think for me, that's one of the ways that, and speaking of the substance, like I think for a lot of people right now, it's their first real introduction to body horror. And I think that that's so exciting for me to see because body horror is my favorite subgenre and like the mode in which I work. And I think there's this sort of like cultural understanding that's happening right this minute that when when the internal becomes external, there's a relief that comes along with that. I don't want to give too much away because I know clearly you haven't seen it yet, but Jess, did you I had such a like out of body experience watching The Substance because seeing it in the theater, I was kind of like watching other people discover this power for the first time. And it's something I've been so embedded in for so long. Did you have a similar experience?
Yeah, and I think definitely. And I saw it with a friend who, because this is also sort of an answer to your previous, like my horror, I came to horror pretty much as almost an adult. Like I wasn't even really in college when I found it as a genre. And as a kid, it wasn't fed to me for whatever reason. My family's very brittle around horror. They like can't do it. But they could do like a lot of Hitchcock and like psychological thriller stuff. So I had that in me. And then in college, I was not a film person. I was a theater person. And so then getting to New York for whatever reason, I began to have a community of like queer people who love horror movies, and it was like, oh, okay, cool. And so I saw The Substance with my sort of like guru, my good friend who's a total like encyclopedic horror freak, and she came out of it really just like shaken by like, I can't believe they let her make that. Like this
Mhm.
is a big studio, like this is a big movie. And it's getting good reviews. And she had this moment of just being like, wait a second, this is like the society, this is Cronenberg, like this is not big studio release. And she was like really moved thinking and talking about that. And I had sort of, I think I had that experience watching it, but I mostly had the like visceral experience of the movie and also like of um the like relentless sort of fairy tale aesthetic of it. I really was so into and moved by and was like spending the whole time being like, God, it's like French, it's so French, but also
Yeah.
so like it's like so nice to look at, even as it's doing all of this. And yeah, it was a little bit of it called back a little bit to my possession experience because I was yelling, other people in the audience were, yeah, there was a lot of like, there's a lot of that, like, so yeah, it was really, and then I was just on I saw it with a few friends and we just like then had to sort of process it first.
Yeah.
um, yeah, and I think something that you said about like that people, it does seem to be unlocking something for people. Like I also think because it is, like I think it is pretty powerful that it's a female director, and like we've had sort of like can't like more directly campy stuff. There's like the Jennifer's Body genre of like, which is great, and I love that, but it's like not. This I feel like has only previously, in my knowledge, happened. The extremity of it is a Cronenberg extremity, is a possession extremity, is a like male director extremity.
Mhm.
And so I'm really jazzed about that. And she seems very cool. I like really knew nothing about her before this. So
Yeah. I
uh,
mean, the French know how to fucking party, man.
oh my
Like,
God. But like so pristinely. Like it's
yes.
so clean and precise, even if
Yes. Yes,
like
and I was listening to an interview with Demi Moore the other day, and she was like, she one of the questions that she was being asked was there an intimacy coordinator? And she kind of laughed, and I was also laughing because I was like, it's France, of course there was.
well, also like with who though? That's the thing. It's such a lonely movie. Like
I
an
know.
intimacy coordinator with yourself. Like, like, what?
Totally.
Like, um, like, I mean, it's really just her and Margaret Qualley, it feels
Yep. Yep.
like active forces, which in and of itself is wild to watch. There is not like another external antagonist.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's so hard sometimes.
I'm curious, has anybody else in the group seen it? Because we have this lovely, like, delightful small group. If anybody wants to jump in and add, I think that would be lovely. I mean, for me, like, I had a similar experience to your friend where I think especially because I'm a filmmaker and body horror, it felt like this, like I'd been given this gift. Like, wait, are we allowed to do this now? Like, are we allowed to do this with stars and a budget? Like, I think she just opened the door for us in a way that I don't think like I ever thought was possible, which was so exciting. Um, but yeah, I was also thinking like something I was thinking a lot about in putting this issue together is we always speak about female hysteria. And of course there's the historical legacy of that and like Charcot and hysteria is always tied to the word women. But I was also, it was really important to us putting the issue together to think about hysteria from a more like contemporary gender expansive perspective and like what it means to bring that term into contemporary culture and into culture that is, where gender is so much more broadly defined than at the time when hysteria was kind of like invented. And I was wondering how as a group we might think about hysteria now and if there are films that you've seen where hysteria is kind of questioned in that way or more like the boundary of the term is kind of being expanded and pushed and poked through. um do either of you have any kind of thoughts about what it might mean now?
It's a really interesting topic, and even the word hysteria, and to use it now, and to have to use it and to move away from medicalization, I suppose, of it, and to think of it more broadly in terms of what it means in a contemporary society is a big topic, and is sorry, and as I'm talking, I'm trying to think of
Go
of
for it.
expression in typical fashion. It's kind of like completely left my mind. But yeah, it just seemed to me, and writing this piece, it just kind of seemed to me, and I had a lot of conversation about this with Anna again about in terms of how we define hysteria and anxiety and depression, and and that sense of belonging or not belonging, and you were just talking about the substance again. So I can't talk about the film because I haven't seen it, but I get the buzz around it. But it's kind of exciting to see it being developed as a concept, and audiences being more ready to be more excited to explore that theme, which means it's kind of like it's grown in not popularity, but like people are kind of like they're more open to talk about it and to think about it. And yeah, so I'm not sure where I'm going with this really, but you get some
Wildly
points.
wonderful. Well, I think it's more like generally accepted that like we are all functionally hysterical, especially like under the current social conditions we're living in. Like we're all way too sensitive because there's too much information and we're all like way too permeable and excitable and like any sort of like ye olde definition of hysteric, like we're all kind of there in some way. And it's as there's like some kind of there's both like mental health jargon now about like sensitivities and what it is to be sensitive in certain ways, and that's like really empowering for people. And there's also a kind of like um there's still a deep patriarchal misogynist labeling of public emotionality as like female, feminine, whatever the hell, even as like some of the most hysteric public figures are like, the far right psychos. Like it's just this really interesting moment of like, ooh, huh. Like what are we really doing with it as a term? And like I keep thinking about like, yeah, like do people still think of it as like being curable by taking out your womb or something? Like, no, I hope not, but maybe because there's some loons. Um, but I do really feel like at least in my sphere, it's not like a joke, but it's like, yeah, we're all like we all really identify as hysterics. And it's sort of like I find it sort of empowering sometimes to be like, oh yeah, this is like the range of emotion that I'm interested in embodying in the world, and this is the range of emotion I'm interested in seeing other people embody. In except like, except when it gets like uncontrollable and scary, and then it's mostly politically terrifying nightmare people. So like I'm actually okay.
Yeah, I was thinking, no, I absolutely. And it's interesting because I was thinking like one thing I wanted to talk about was the way that like hysterical women in horror, the way that they're deployed in narrative now has kind of shifted a little bit. Like if you think about The Watcher or Don't Worry, Darling, or it, in fact, Substance, like the hysterical women in the films are right and are like the source of there are screen surrogates, like our point of identification is the hysterical woman. And I was wondering, like, do you see hysteria kind of shifting in that way in contemporary horror or sci-fi films where like the hysterics are actually supposed to be believed and we are supposed to identify with them as opposed to, more like antiquated, misogynist, tropey horror films?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's definitely, this shit that you're talking about when now the trope of the crazy woman is like she's not actually she's not, she's the one who is to be believed. And it's been, this trope, this crazy woman, has been sensationalized in horror and in film in general actually for such a long time. I'm thinking of films like, Straight Jackets or Homicidal, and where it's just, that's the explanations. She's just crazy. That's why she's doing these things. Or she's been sent on the brink of hysteria because of of her husband who's cheating on her, and this kind of oversimplification of of those of the condition basically. So it's really interesting now to see this trope being, this subversion of the trope really being, kind of like you have reasons to be paranoid, and you have reason to wonder, to ask questions, and and you dig, and if you dig, you'll find, that actually it's everyone else is crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think a reason I was thinking recently about like because I saw Vertigo in like a beautiful 70 millimeter print that I had like never seen it like that before. And that movie is like a very foundational text for me. Um, and the just like this is not a spoiler, but they also have like an incredible Vertigo joke in the substance, which like if anybody, it's so funny. I laughed so hard. Anyway, but seeing Vertigo again, um, it it did something to me about like what is it, because historically like crazy overwhelming and like usually in the classic like hysteria definition like intensely sexually repressed women are like often depicted by like really sicko dudes, right? So it's like Polanski does it and Hitchcock does it, and like I don't know that much about the like actual sick, just a lot of sickos, and it's like what and looking at Vertigo again, I was like, you know what, I was actually expecting that this would be not that this would be like blanket and shitty, and it isn't exactly. Like there's something really obsessive and interesting and like um and not hateful about the way that they depict that woman in Vertigo, about the way he depicts that woman in Vertigo. And like kind of the same, even sometimes, I hate to say it, for Polanski. So I'm like, I'm really, but it never feels revelatory. The women die, horrible things happen to them, like nothing actually gets moved or done. Like patriarchy wins every time. So it's, but something about like how excited and interested and interesting they find these hysterical women, I really have resonated and responded to in time. Like I like watching, like, did anybody ever see Repulsion, that Polanski movie where it's just like happening? Like that movie is horrifying, but it's also like she's pretty rad. Like it's just, or like, you know what I mean? Like, there's this really interesting push and pull about how historically these kinds of women have been depicted, but like usually they always have to suffer and die. So they're allowed to be amazing, but then they die. And I do feel like that we're getting past in some pretty interesting and exciting ways. And I'm like really like, it's not even like final girl stuff anymore. It's like, well, who is this person and how are they gonna evolve? Or like, who is this person and like, what have we done to them? And we have to kind of reckon with what we've done to them, which I feel like is the substance version. So like, I'm really interested to see where that goes, because I do think that like historically, yeah, there were some like surprisingly moving portraits of hysterical women. It was just they always then had to be punished.
I think
So
they've
yeah.
had the role of the monster, right? It's like it's, you know, the typical monster movie, and that there's no place in society for the monster at the end. So it needs, you know, the kind of the status quo needs to be, you know, it's to be beset. It's just, you know, there's no place for them to thrive in society. You know, they said like we passed that and we passed the final girl stage. It's more like how is you know, how is she going to evolve in this world, and how is the world going to, you know, change thanks to her?
Well, and it's part of why I love Let's Scare Jessica to Death so much, is like she's fully, the movie is engaged in the question of if she's crazy or if there's vampires, and then, and then by the end, like she's right. It's her in a boat and she's right. And like part of writing the piece that I did for me was like Kira Janice like winds up there in a very sort of melancholic place of like she's alone, it's horrible. And I'm like, I actually think it's pretty great, the ending of that movie. Like she's alone in a boat without her horrible fucking husband. And like now she can live, like she can row her boat to the other side of the lake. So I do feel like there are, and that almost felt sort of like accidental maybe, or like it's just, or just really open. And I'm excited for more of that kind of, and I think we are getting more of that kind of horror where like whoever the protagonist is and whatever their very sensible societal oppressions are, like they move with them and through them, and they use them, and they freak out and come back in really interesting ways.
Have either of you seen Watcher by Chloe Kuno? Yeah. Rachel, you have, yeah, it's fantastic. And I think it's really like one of the most interesting contemporary depictions of a hysterical woman, and the way that you really get like the full arc of her gaslighting and her internal like um disbelief of her own reality, and then the way that it like folds in on itself, and just kind of like uh the blending of reality and unreality is really spectacular. Highly recommend, and definitely like heavily influenced by Hitchcock and a kind of like feminist retelling of Hitchcock. And yeah, highly recommend. But I was wondering too, like, are there any horror films that you've seen recently, or filmmakers in the horror space that you're really excited about, or something that felt like a breakthrough moment for you recently?
I think oh, I can't remember her name, so I'm sorry. The filmmaker who did Raw and Titan.
Yeah, Julia Ducournau.
and yes, it's not like super super recent, but and that Titan again, like I think it's like changed my changed the way I am inside. Really, it's like it's one of
Yeah.
these films where it's just yeah, like you said, the French, they just know how to fuck with your head, really. So I think for me that's been one of these voices in the last few years that's just I think it's completely redefining the landscape in terms of storytelling, but visual style as well, and that strong identity that women have in front and behind the camera as well. So,
Yeah, she changed my life absolutely. I mean, Titan was beyond amazing, and also just for raw, like it was, yeah, the French, they're so unflinching and so just unafraid to go to the places that I think a lot of American filmmakers kind of like go right up to the edge and then step back from.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm still engaged in my adult process of like making up horror, like re-educating myself in the genre. So I haven't seen that much new stuff. I just sort of keep filling in old gaps, which means that like I think I'm seeing a lot of the like, you know, sickos making movies, except for beloved David Cronenberg, who I feel like I just finally have completed and really feel so tenderly towards, even as like The Brood was such an important movie for me, even as like that movie is so simplistic and she is such a villain. But also what it's depicting is so specific and weird and glorious that I just am like down. Like I just don't really care. I'm really excited for his new. I'm like I sort of don't. If he's not doing pure horror, I still want to see what he's doing. So, I think I'm like still finishing up my David Cronenberg completism, and yeah, and The Brood especially, which I hadn't seen and saw like relatively recently in the last year or so, was a big deal for me, especially because it felt like a transmuting. Like I guess some of my friends told me that's his divorce movie, and
Mhm.
so like so much hatred in that movie and so much pain, but he manages to transmute it in this way that's like not loving of the woman character, but isn't like fully indicting of her either. Like she's kind of just she's socially construct she's like in this spooky therapeutic relationship, she's in a lot of like questionable other relationships, and he like lets her be somebody and not just like a succubus and not just like some. So I don't know, I found that kind of moving weirdly even though she's like
No, me too. And also like for that's his Kramer versus Kramer,
totally.
like like
Like, and it's like so much better, like I think it's great.
yes, it's so much better. And for me, like,
Nuanced and interesting.
yeah, I mean, Dead Ringers for me, like that I think is one of the most interesting depictions of hysteria. And actually, like what we were speaking to before, like the men are the hysterics in that film, a
Yeah,
1000%. And if you haven't seen the new
I
TV show,
I haven't. I've heard mixed things, so I didn't want to watch it, but now, yeah,
I
okay,
for
great.
me, I was like blown away. Like, cannot recommend it enough. I was terrified because Dead Ringers is like top three favorite movies of all time. And I was kind of terrified that it would be bad. But I adored it and think that like it is right up there with the original. And also really like a complex it does not just do the shift of like, well, first it was men and now it's women, you guys, we did something really modern. Like it really has like its tentacles in the real like problems of the original film and does like really complicated things with it. And um the Karen Kusama directed one of the episodes, and it's like a total knockout. So yeah, highly recommend.
Yeah, I love her. I love Rachel Weisz. I was like in, except for the what you described, yeah, the like worry that it wouldn't be. Because I do think like the male hysteria of Dead Ringers is so fabulous, and he just lets it. He's like not like David Cronenberg just seems to be somebody who's like secure enough to actually be interested in what masculinity is, like not be so freaking precious about
Yeah.
like it's just really cool. So that said, I've never seen like A History of Violence or some of his other movies that for whatever reason that's the one that I still haven't seen, and that I'm like I'm not gonna see it. But yes, great.
Yeah. Highly recommend. Yeah, and I guess like I would love, I don't know, does anybody else have any questions that they want to ask these two brilliant people? I'm excited to kind of open it up a little bit.
I'll go.
Yeah, Viva.
I'm curious, if there were certain writers that you were just thinking of and emulating in your own particular ways as you're working on your pieces. Whoever feels like taking it away.
I think for me, well, I mean, obviously we keep mentioning Killer so that was, an obvious one, but also Anna Bokuskaya has written quite a lot on, her relationship with horror and kind of, treating, her personal history as well through that. So her new book, Feeding the Monster, I thought was, so fantastic in that respect. So that was kind of an inspiration as well, and not horror at all actually, but Anne-Marie Tendler, wrote a book, Men Have Called Her Crazy, and I thought her way of exploring her own relationship to anxiety, depression, hysteria, her journey into being institutionalized, and was a real inspiration in that respect as well. The way that she does it, that is so quiet and relatable. And again, earlier we were talking about the way that hysteria has been sensationalized a lot in horror, and what I found amazing in films like Let's Care Jessica to Death, and in books like Men Have Called Her Crazy, is that I want to say gentle way to deal with it, but it's not even about this. But it's not about it's also not about having those those batshit crazy moment that can be cathartic. It can be really exciting to explore in horror, but it's about having all those levels. I think, and it's I just found the way that she was writing about it such an inspiration, because you can just attach your own history to it as well, and it's just fantastic.
I've been wanting to read that book. I'm glad to have this research to it. Yeah, I get to write everything down. It's very good. One thing before I forget, which is what you said, I think about like not having everything be batshit crazy, but like having variation. I will say, and I will stop talking about the substance, but that maybe is my only critique of the substance, is that it did feel like occasionally it got stuck at an 11, and it was like 11, 11, 11, 11, 11. And I was just sort of like, I do want a couple moments more. There are some, but like, because I think you're right. I think they're really important, just from a rhythmic perspective of like, you have to come down a little so that you can come back up. In terms of writers, with this piece, it's funny. I was listening to Clelia, and now I can't think of it. I'm sure there are many. What's funny is like going back this time, because I was using that Yukasovsky Cedric so much, I think she was kind of the voice I was trying to use a little bit, and which the essay I used of hers is Paranoid and Reparative Reading, but the text of hers that like I love the most and think about all the time is the Dialogue on Love, which is this book she wrote that is trying to depict her therapeutic relationship during cancer. So it's her and her therapist, and she got her therapist's notes. She worked really closely with him and like uses some of his notes in the writing. she uses like haiku form. She uses like all kinds of other forms to try to, I think, sort of gently, like Clelia was talking about, move through the personal and the traumatic, really kind of slow, thoughtful, going back, what did I mean? How do I mean it kind of way. So I think if that essay was probably, she was sort of the biggest person I was thinking with, which is weird because like structurally they don't really have anything in common, but I think, and then like in terms of writer, yeah, I don't feel smart about that question right now, though I love it and it's a great question. So I'll think about it more if there's anything else that comes up.
I just read a book called Mother Thing that I thought was really amazing. It's a novel about like, yeah, it definitely touched on hysteria for sure and was really like exciting and deliciously violent. And Julia Armfield's new book, Our Wives Under the Sea, was really beautiful as well. I've been trying to kind of like read a lot of novels that sort of take up the hysterical woman as the kind of central figure and work from her perspective. And I think, Night Bitch as well, like just incredible. I'm a little nervous about the movie, though, I have to be honest. I was like really excited about it, and then I saw the trailer and I was like,
Yeah.
oh no.
I heard it's not that good too. Yeah, it's a
It doesn't
little.
look that good, and I was so excited. Um,
It might be hard to translate that though.
yeah, yeah, I had high hopes.
Oh, the other person I was going to mention who also writes a Kira Janice essay is Joanna Hedva's new book, which is really lovely, which is all of her collected writings about. She wrote this as a sick girl theory a long time ago, which sort of made the rounds, and this is like a bigger collection of her nonfiction writing, and she has a great essay about House of Psychotic Women in there too, and I can't remember what it's called, but it's Joanna Hedva, and it's something about death, and it's
Well,
new.
you also talked about Sontag,
Yes.
illness as
Mother.
metaphor. Is that right?
Mother forever, unfortunately.
I
Oh no.
never knew about that book actually. I just ordered it. I'm really excited about it.
It's rough. What's really
Mm.
interesting about that book is like she is such a relentless intellect, and the way that she processed, and actually Joanna Hedva has a great Sontag sort of like takedown in some ways. Um, loving takedown, but like she fully absented herself from her writing about cancer. Like she was not and she refused to write about herself in that writing. She theorized it, she made it, and she had a sort of like aggressively masculine, whatever, it's not masculine, classically masculinist approach to like, I'm a theorist, I'm a writer, my shit doesn't matter. And so that is like kind of where illness as a metaphor comes from, which isn't to say that it's not incredible, because it is, but it's just like, it's odd that that is her cancer book because she like isn't in it.
Mm.
And but then she also wrote AIDS and its metaphors, which usually they're collected. And that is like much more in her, more like political. They're both really political, but like AIDS and its metaphors is like the really political version of the thinking she's trying to do in illness as a metaphor about like romanticism, romanticizing illness and romanticizing frailty, and the ways that like illness gets personalized and like it's your fault, it's who you are, it's your obsessive attachment to um to death basically. So I really love that book, and it's also really troubling sometimes because it does feel like it gets a little bit excoriating, without, it's like self-excoriating, but there's no self in it. Like she's really mean to
Mm.
herself, but she's not there.
That's so interesting. Any other questions? Um, okay, so I want to encourage everybody to read Clelia and Jess's pieces. They're spectacular and were so exciting to me because they really felt so like I've lived with Kira Janice on my bookshelf for so long, and that book was so like central to me. And then to kind of see these new, like full of life, deeply personal and vulnerable and analytical and fresh, like to have this injection of life and passion again in a book that has felt so like central to me, and then to go in your own directions. It's exactly what we look for in Bloodletter, and I felt so grateful to be able to put them into the world. And your voices are so important and fantastic, and I'm so glad we got to talk and to dive into these topics that I care so much about. So I can't think of anybody I'd rather spend my Saturday with. And thank you for letting us give your pieces a home. It's such an incredible honor. I do want to ask before I go, because I want to know, what are you guys working on right now? What can we follow? Where can we find you? What are you doing? What can we keep our eyes on? Clelia, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So you can find me at Monstrous Flesh on Instagram. We've got a new zine coming out. So this is issue 1 of the Monstrous Flesh journal, but we've got issue 2 coming out in a few weeks. So excited about this. Meg and I are recording podcasts as well, so they're coming out all the time. I'm doing a new course on hysterical women, actually. Or women we love to, women they want us to hate, rather. It's called Killjoy. So starting that in a couple of weeks as well. And yeah, and thank you so much for having my article. It means so much to me to to have it included in Bloodletter. I mean, I've been following what you do for the past year, and I'm just blown away by by your work. So yeah, thank you so much, and thank you, Jess. It's been amazing to to talk to you.
It's so great to meet you. Do you teach online? Is it an online class?
No, it's just in person at the moment, but yeah, it's
Like, I can come, I want to come.
yeah, it's meant to be redundant to be like, I got a new course, but anyway.
Oh no, cool. I mean, in person is better for teaching. It's nicer to teach in person, so I'm glad for you. I'm glad for yours.
Thank you.
Yeah, totally thrilled. Really great to meet and talk with all of you. And what am I trying to do? I am I run a very small like performance publishing press project called Floorwork Press, which I'm like just getting off the ground in new ways. So I'm doing that. That's on Instagram. And I am trying to write more good old illness writing. So we'll see if that ever actually happens. But yeah, I'm like midway through that manuscript right now. So we'll see where we get. But yeah. And then yeah, so great. The issue looks beautiful too. Like the illustrations are so good.
Zoe is
Yeah,
beyond.
I really have with that.
Thank you. Thank you guys. And thank you for being here. Thank you for participating to our wonderful audience. And we have another event at 3 o'clock PST today. So, those conversions, I don't know. But yeah, if you want to join us for some wine and poetry, please, I would love to see you there. And thank you guys so much. So good to see you.